Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the seminar video about handedness, by Dr. Gerd Hummer, MD. My name is Helmut Pilhar. I am the father of Olivia and the lecturer, appointed by Dr. Hummer, about Germanische Heilkunde theory. To know the biological handedness is at least as important as to know one's biological gender. The handedness can be determined with the help of the so-called clapping test. The biological handedness indicates the partner and mother-child side, and never change in life. The objective of this seminar tutorial is to understand: why does the affected person always have symptoms on one side of the body, and not on the other? What determines biological handedness? What distinguishes left-handed from right-handed people? How can you still find out the biological handedness if the clapping test fails? What about the footness or eyeness? What influence do hormones have on biological handedness? Learn more about this in the 1.5-hour seminar video. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you to this seminar tutorial of Germanische Heilkunde by Dr. Gerd Hummer, MD. My name is Helmut Pilhar. I am the lecturer, authorized by Dr. Hummer on Germanische Heilkunde theory, which is a great honor for me. Initially, I was a technician. I graduated from the Higher Technical School for Electrical Engineering, and a second time for Mechanical Engineering in Wiener Neustadt. Ultimately, I worked as a software engineer. I have been married since 1990 to my wife Erica, with whom I have 4, now grown-up children. We are also grandparents, several times over. Due to the cancer of our then 6-year-old daughter Olivia, in 1995, we came to Dr. Hummer, and thus into a medical dispute, which continues to this day. Since 1997 I have been teaching the legacy of Dr. Hummer. My motto is: Germanische Heilkunde belongs to general education. Therefore, inform yourself as long as you are healthy. Dr. Hummer said, knowing the biological handedness is as important as knowing the gender. The cause of the disease. The linchpin in Germanische Heilkunde is the biological conflict, the Dirk-Hummer syndrome, or DHS for short. This shocking moment is the cause of those diseases that develop by themselves, for example cancer, chronic diseases, allergies, and psychoses. This DHS has to be found, because only then can one know how a possible therapy has to be done. The therapy must be derived from the conflict. As individual as we humans are, our conflicts are equally individual, and accordingly, the solution must be as uniquely individual. There can be no patent remedy. The therapist's first action. Now, before the therapist goes to the patient in search of this conflict shock, he routinely clarifies 3 things beforehand. Shaking hands. He shakes hands with the patient, and thus already has the first diagnosis. Are the hands ice cold or boiling hot? Is the patient sympathicatonic or vagatonic? Is the patient possibly in an active conflict, or in a healing phase? At my live lecture, I illustrate this important initial diagnosis by shaking hands with the listener sitting in front of me. This person has warmer hands than I do 99% of the time, because they are at rest and vagatonic and listening to me. In contrast, I have to present the lecture and am therefore stressed and sympathicatonic. My victim usually nods their head in agreement with my explanations. If I promptly ask them to continue the lecture instead of me, their attitude usually becomes rigid. If I would actually get this listener on stage, they would become sympathicatonic with cold hands, just like me. Of course, everyday stress, without an active sensible biological special program, SBS, can also cause cold hands. During the day, and warmer ones at night, one has cold extremities caused by the standard and healthy day-night rhythm. The sympathicus and the vagus alternate. At a lecture, I am always sympathicatonic and have correspondingly cold hands, at least for the first half hour. If the audience follows my lecture, and no unpleasant incidents occur, I start to calm down. And by the end of the lecture, my hands are back to normal warmth. Following are 2 examples, where the person sitting in front of me had ice-cold hands, which led to a diagnosis or realization. In both cases, they were women. Case study: organ donation. In the first case, I had a specific conversation with the test person after the lecture, because of her cold hands. It turned out that she had an organ transplant and had to take so-called immunosuppressive drugs. She must never again enter a vagatonic healing phase, because otherwise, the microbes that would become active would break down her donor organ. This woman had therefore cold hands due to medication, by sympathetic atonic acting means. The chemo-tortured person also has cold hands. So just by shaking hands, I became aware of it. Case study: breast cancer. With the second test person, it was even more exciting. She sought a conversation with me of her accord, after the lecture. She explained that she had known Germanische Heilkunde for a long time, and that she had an intraductal mammacarcinoma. Of course, I still remembered her cold hands and drew her attention to this contradiction. An intraductal mammacia, squamous epithelium, is a vague atonic healing phase symptom. This does not fit her ice-cold hands. On the other hand, the mammary gland CA is a sympathetic atonic and conflict-active symptom. She insisted that I look at her breast. I am always very embarrassed by such moments, since I am not a therapist. However, when I saw her well-demarcated lump, I reiterated my opinion. It was not the milk ducts in healing, but the mammary glands that must be active. In intraductal breast cancer, the breast is more filled with water due to the milk ducts healing swelling. At the same time, the conflict-active mammary gland carcinomas form a compact and usually well-demarcated nodule. I referred her to Dr. Hummer, who confirmed a conflict-active mammary gland carcinoma. Poor woman. She thought to have understood the Germanische Heilkunde, self-diagnosed herself with a solved separation conflict of the milk ducts. However, she overlooked her active worry-dispute conflict, concerning the milk glands. Above all, she did not notice that her hands were ice-cold. No one had noticed, at least no one called her attention to such an important symptom. I often observe that friends of Germanische Heilkunde cannot distinguish between a psychological problem and a biological conflict. Admittedly, it is also not easy and not to be understood immediately. One must be able to study and comprehend it based on many case studies. Above all, however, one should understand oneself, for example one's own symptoms on the level of the organs, and on the level of the psyche. One should keep a symptom diary. Handshaking is forbidden. I think these two cases clearly illustrate how efficient handshaking is as a diagnosis. The nonsense of an anti-coronavirus glove already prevents the first diagnosis. If one can do something wrong, then conventional medicine creates this. Today's behavioral commandment to avoid a handshake belongs to the so-called new normal, which lets us humans alienate each other socially. The time will come, where one may not touch each other anymore. Not only that, a cultural attribute is forbidden. With it worldwide, all people are forbidden their social needs as a human being. Through this, mankind generally becomes sicker and will not want to reproduce anymore. If one puts a pot over the flower to receive no more light, then this flower will die. We, humans, are very social beings. And this media hype of the coronavirus is justified with unprovable hypotheses of a science by refuted traditional medicine. It is really hair-pulling. Clapping test. The second thing the Germanic therapist does, is the clapping test. To determine partner and mother-child sides. We will discuss biological handedness in more detail in a moment. Hormonal status. The third step of the therapist would be to clarify the hormonal situation. The hormonal situation of male-female has nothing to do with handedness. These are two different things. In contrast to handedness, which can never change, the hormone situation can change at any time, for example by medication. In the moment of the conflict, associations are made past the mind. Thus, the conflict content is assigned and determined involuntarily. Thereby, it makes a big difference whether the person feels male or female. The hormone situation, therefore, determines our thinking, acting, and at which place in the brain the Hummer focus will strike, in the case of conflict. And with which SBS we will react. To recognize whether a patient is a man or a woman is relatively easy. Still, it is also getting more and more challenging nowadays. For instance, take the example of the emergence of transgender identities, or gender-fluid identities. One must look more closely to recognize the hormonal status. Alone this confusion of the sexes prepares the breeding ground for many further conflicts, that will come to this re-educated future society. But take note. There are also masculine women and feminine men by nature, like by the completely normal hormonal change. Just because a woman is a woman, does not mean that she is female. The same, only the other way around, is valid for men. The woman comes into menopause at about 50 years of age. The estrogen in her ovaries decreases. Thus, she becomes masculine and now has male territorial behavior. The man enters menopause at about 70 to 75 years of age. The testosterone in his testicles decreases. Thus, he becomes feminine and now has female territorial behavior. You can really say that the woman becomes a man and then the man becomes a woman. In the brain, they also change the territorial area sides. Interesting that the vernacular uses the term change for this. The behavior of the woman changes thereby fundamentally. This masculine woman goes into the offensive, and the feminine man goes after the change into the defensive. How much the behavior of the human being changes, when one's hormone situation changes, you, dear student, have indeed already observed yourself. The married couple. Let's take the young married couple. The masculine man walks in front and protects his wife. The feminine woman lets herself be protected and walks behind at a respectable distance, as it should be, fun. Now the couple turns 50. The woman comes into menopause, becomes masculine, and has male territorial behavior. Now, she also needs her room, where she can put her sewing machine and lock. Suddenly, there are two territorial deer in the same household. Now they want to go through the door at the same time, and the sparks fly. This disharmony now lasts 20 to 25 years, until finally the man with 70 to 75 years also gets into his change. With him, the testosterone of the testicle sinks. He loses his masculine territorial behavior and becomes feminine. Now, the grandma strides in front and grandpa groping behind. Grandma now goes on the offensive and chooses the right way for the defensive grandpa. Now it harmonizes between them again, so half and half. You can observe this every day, can't you? So, you can't compare the feminine woman with the masculine grandma, and you can't compare the masculine man with the feminine grandpa. They are almost different beings. By the way, the boy is masculine and remains so as a man. The girl is feminine and also remains as a woman. So, the hormonal situation is nothing fixed and can change. Also, by removing the ovaries in the woman or by removing the testicles in the man, a hormonal change occurs. The woman becomes masculine, and the man becomes feminine. The same effect is achieved with chemotherapy. Chemo castrates, at least temporarily. In contrast to the changeable hormonal position, the handedness can never change. For example, if one is right-handed, one does not become left-handed by the change. Thus, the partner and mother-child sides remain fixed until death. The clap test. The right-handed person claps with the right hand into the resting left hand, and the left-handed person claps with the left hand into the resting right hand. The more moving hand is the partner hand. If you clap with the right hand from below high into the resting left hand, you are right-handed. If you hit the resting left hand from above with the right hand, you are right-handed. If the left hand is the more moving hand when clapping, then you are left-handed. In a right-handed person, the right side is the partner side, and the left side is the mother-child side. From the crown of the head to the sole. On the left side of the body, the right-handed person suffers conflicts because of or around his biological mother, equivalent person of the older generation, or around his biological child, equivalent person of the younger generation. For the right-handed person, the right side is the partner side. Here he suffers conflicts because of or around his partner. Partners are all the other people we have to deal with. They are mostly from the same generation as, for example, the life partner, siblings, work colleagues, friends, opponents, rivals, tax officials, and the father is considered a partner. In-laws or grandpa and grandma are also partners. With a left-handed person, it is the other way around. In the left-handed person, the left side is the partner, and the right side is the mother-child side. Many people clap on the left, but write on the right. These people have either been specifically retrained to write on the right or have unconsciously retrained themselves, but are biologically left-handed. Often these people are surprised then and deny it even to be biological left-handed. In Japan, in olden times, the circumstance of being left-handed was even legally considered a reason for divorce. Nonsense cubed. It is amazing that Mother Nature has kept these possibilities open with a different biological laterality. What's more, I have noticed with these aha left clappers, that they are often biological right eyes. Due to the dominance of their right eye, they inherently prefer their right hand. Thus, these biological left-handers have retrained themselves to the right by themselves. Time of its determination. Biological handedness is decided at the first cell division of the fertilized egg, and remains fixed throughout life. We know this from observing identical twins. The fertilized egg divides. The two cells drift apart and start cell division all over again. This is how identical twins are formed. With them, one always claps on the right and the other on the left. With identical twins, therefore, one is always biologically right-handed, and the other is biologically left-handed. The biological handedness is determined already with the first cell division and does not change the whole life long. As we will still learn from the cerebellum, the handedness is decisive. Likewise, in the cerebral medulla and in the cerebral cortex, handedness is of great significance. In the brainstem, however, the biological handedness has no significance at all. The evolutionarily oldest part of the brain, that is the brainstem-controlled SBSs, were sensibly arranged differently by Mother Nature. In the brainstem, neither do we find any social behavior. At that time, between mother-child and partner, obviously was not distinguished yet. As an example, I would like to mention briefly intestinal cancer. If it occurs on the right side, it has nothing to do with the handedness. Rather, it concerns here an indigestible morsel which one cannot get rid of. We will come to this in more detail in due course. Note: with the first cell division of the fertilized egg cell, the cerebellum is already put on. What do mother-child and partner mean? Why mother-child belong together, and all others are partners, has to do with our developmental history. The early man was female. You can still see the remnants of this in today's man with his nipples. Have you, dear student, ever thought about why the man needs nipples? Possibly for playing or maybe for piercing? No, nonsense. The man's nipples are one piece of evidence, among many, that we humans have gone through evolutionary history. Without wanting to discuss the theory of evolution in detail now, one sees with the Germanische Heilkunde that as part of creation, we can infer creation itself. Creation is something living, which develops itself. Back to the meaning of the two sides of the body. In nature, the relationship between mother-child is always evident. The mother knows among 100 children, this one there in front, that is mine. The child also knows among hundreds of women, this one there behind, that is my mother. With daddy, however, the child can never be quite sure. Is it the nice uncle, or maybe the other one? And even the father never knows for sure, is that my child, or is it that one? Or maybe they are even all mine? Now, put yourself in a mother's shoes. She knows her biological child, and she knows her own biological mother. Everyone else around is a partner. So, partners are people with whom we have to deal. With the Pope, you will have rather no biological conflict. Maybe a psychological problem, but no biological conflict. With the Pope, you have directly nothing to do. But with a life partner, the boss, or the mother-in-law, you have to arrange. By the way, the most conflict-prone environment is, of course, your own family, the circle of friends, neighborhood, or workplace with boss and colleagues. There are usually also conflicts to look for. The biological handedness has nothing to do with the sex or the hormone situation. It is the same with men and women. The right-handed woman is the same as the right-handed man, the right body side being the partner side. The biological handedness does not change by menopause. Note: the biological handedness cannot change by any means. It is determined at the fertilization of the egg, and remains for a lifetime. Identical twins, observe, dear student, how you are walking together with your partner. Which one of you walks on the left, and which one walks on the right? Or on which side of the bed do you sleep? Usually, you have each other lying on your partner's side. Siblings also see each other as partners. So, the sister sees the sister and the brother as partners. The brother sees the brother and the sister as partners. That this biological handedness has absolutely nothing to do with the hormone situation. One sees well in the photo of these twin sisters in their young and older years. Unconstrained setup, one lines up with its partner side to the partner, all the same, whether as a child or adult. The left-handed person has his partner on the left and the right-handed person on the right. An ideal partnership would also be between a left-handed and a right-handed person. When both are seated at the table, the left-handed person sits on the right and the right-handed person on the left. They then have each other, as with twins, on their partner's side. Whereas with two right-handed partners, one has to put his partner on his mother-child side. Which could possibly also have a deeper meaning. My wife and I are both right-handed. In bed, she lies on my partner's side, on the right. And for me, my wife is a real fighting companion, with whom one can go through thick and thin. I see my wife as a partner. On the other hand, my wife has me lying on her left mother-child side. But I cannot imagine that my wife takes care of me like a mother takes care of her child, and has to look after me. But my wife is a super mother to her 4 children, and still is to this day. My wife is a motherly woman, who could also cook damn well. Gerd praised my wife, because of her cooking skills, and the Erica soup always had to be cooked. But my wife also lays to the right of me in the marital bed for practical reasons. When the children woke up at night, her side of the bed was closer to the bedroom door, and I could continue to sleep undisturbed. Mother Nature relieved the husband of his duty of motherhood. Mother Nature has imposed other duties on the husband. The handedness in the cortical territorial area. In the brainstem, glandular tissue, the handedness has no meaning yet. Only starting from the cerebellum, the biological handedness decides which organ side in case of conflict, the symptoms will appear. The cerebellum-controlled breast cancer is determined, therefore sidewise, by the biological handedness. Likewise, the cerebral medulla-controlled shoulder. Does one have shoulder pain on his partner or on his mother-child side? Just as the cortical-controlled neurodermatitis or motor paralysis. Where does one have the paralysis? On the left, or on the right? Is one left or right-handed? In boxing, the knowledge of the opponent's handedness is said to be very important. Keyword, left hook. There are supposed to be about 40% left-handers and about 60% right-handers in the world. The left-handers are, therefore, in the minority. When it comes to biological handedness, however, the territorial area is the most important. There, the left-handedness is something special and something exciting. In the cerebral cortex, we always have the female area on the left and the male area on the right, for men and women, for left and right-handed people, regardless of whom. The reason for this lies with the hormones. In these territorial areas, both the biological handedness and the hormonal situation play a decisive role. This makes it naturally somewhat more complicated in understanding. Still, nevertheless, there are also rules here, and one can derive a lot from them. Now, the man feels naturally masculine, with male territorial behavior. So if it comes to a territory area conflict with the man, then this conflict must be one from the right list. Thus, a territory fear, territory loss, territory anger, or a male territory marking conflict. Female territorial area conflicts can't be perceived by the male at all. Of course, the same is true for the female. She has female territorial behavior. If there's a conflict with her, it must be from the left list, a fright conflict, a sexual conflict, an identity conflict, or a female territorial marking conflict. She can't feel the male territoriality, and so she also misses the famous ass. With the girl and the boy, it is the same as the adults. When the children become mature, no hormonal change takes place. So, no matter how old the woman or girl is, the first territorial conflict must be a female, from the left list. No matter how old the male or the boy is, the first territorial conflict must be a male, from the right list. Notice, this brain map of the territorial areas applies to the right-handed. With the left-handed comes the night hop. The night hop simply means that the impact in the brain for a left-handed person is in the opposite hemisphere. Thus, for a left-handed male, the Hummer focus will occur directly across the brain, in the left hemisphere, and for a left-handed female, the Hummer focus will occur directly across in the right hemisphere. Let's now play through the very first conflict and see what happens as a result. The right-handed man. In the right-handed man, the Hummer focus strikes in the right male territorial area. This one Hummer focus now closes the right male territorial area for him. Thus, the right-handed man is deprived of his previously male territorial behavior, and becomes conflictively female. His left female territorial area is still unblocked. Suppose this closure of his right male territorial area side happens to this right-handed person, early before puberty. In that case, he gets female round shoulders. The right-handed person is cerebrally castrated with this one Hummer focus, and is actually gay. Whether he lives out his homosexuality or not is all the same to Mother Nature. In any case, this right-hander is now female. With homosexuals, one can recognize with relative ease by their shoulder form who is the woman and who is the man in their partnership. The left-handed man. The left-handed man naturally reacts in a masculine way, with his first territorial area conflict. However, in left-handed man, the so-called night hop is present. Although the conflict was felt male, this strikes with the night hop exactly on the opposite side, in the female territorial area. With a left-hander now, his left female territorial area side is closed. It takes the female part from his thinking, and he becomes purely male. If this conflict happens early in his childhood, he nevertheless gets straight shoulders, because his right male territorial area remains free. There is a lot more happening concerning these territorial areas. I refer to the subject of psychosis. Because the left-handed person becomes even more male, while the right-handed person becomes female, the left-handed person is a typical alpha. He will solve this male territorial conflict possibly much more quickly than the female right-hander. If a man has noticeably straight shoulders, let him clap once. Often this man is a left-hander. The right-handed woman. The right-handed woman has her first, inevitably female territorial area conflict, the Hummer focus in the left female territorial area. For the right-handed woman, as I said, this territory area map is correct. This one conflict now closes her left female territorial area side, and she becomes male. If this happens to her early before her puberty, she gets straight male shoulders. She also doesn't get her menstruation at age 11, but later. Have a woman with straight shoulders clap her hands. Typically, she is right-handed. It may be that this right-handed masculine female also does not have children and does not want to have children. Not to reproduce seems to be anathema to Mother Nature. With a left-hander, Mother Nature created an alternative. The left-handed woman. Suppose the left-handed woman suffers her first inevitably female territorial conflict. In that case, this Hummer focus strikes with her because of the so-called night hop in the right male territorial area, although it was felt female. For the left-handed woman, the right male territorial area becomes closed. The male part is taken out of her feeling and thinking. The left female territorial area side is still free. The left-handed woman thus becomes super feminine. Her shoulder form remains round and feminine. When you meet a woman with round shoulders, let this lady clap her hands. Mostly she is left-handed. Note: one can often already conclude from the shoulder form on the handedness. The special thing of the left-handed, alpha. The left-handed person has the privilege of being an alpha male due to his supermasculinity. In the same way, the left-handed woman has the privilege to be an alpha woman. The alpha has no conflicts in the territorial area. An alpha male is a genuine image of man, and not a cretin. Just so, the alpha woman is a full-blooded female, and not just a male intellectual. I know, this excursion into the territorial areas was a little difficult but necessary, to understand the meaning of the biological handedness. Clapping test not clear? If the clapping test is not exact, there are a few more aids. Placing the child on the chest. The person being tested should put an infant against his chest. Typically, the infant is placed on its mother's child's side. The left-handed person places the infant on the right and the right-handed person on the left. It does not matter whether the person being tested is a man or a woman. In the evolutionary history of earlier times, this man did not even exist. Our ancestors were all female. Interesting, right? Back then, however, the biological handedness was still without meaning. One can also take a kitten in the arm instead of the infant. That works just the same. So, in case of conflict, one can also localize the kitten on its mother-child side. Suppose this kitten is later on a tomcat, which protects the house from mice. In that case, this tomcat can have become the partner, and in case of a conflict, he would then be localized on the partner site. Notice, all that counts is what the affected person felt at the DHS's moment. Dirk-Hummer syndrome is the biological conflict. The child, which one had localized initially on the mother-child side, becomes so from puberty to the partner. The mother, however, is always localized on the mother-child side. The mother is our queen, biologically speaking. She takes a central role in our life. If one has a conflict about his mother, this is localized on the mother-child side. To 99.9% of the cases. I know only one case from the literature of Dr. Hummer, of an Oedipal gay, fixated on his mother, who had his mother localized on his partner's side. Clapping like a child. Children clap with both hands in front of the face, and almost synchronous in movement. If the adult claps like a child, attention must be paid to which hand moves more. This hand is the partner hand. Place the back of the hand on the thigh. Another tip for easier detection of the biological handedness. Have the person being tested sit down and place both hands with the hands back on his or her two thighs. In the further clapping process, one hand must remain on the thigh, so only one arm may be moved. The right-handed person claps his right hand into his left hand, and the left-handed person claps his left hand into his right hand. This test is very reliable. Additional notes. The knight. Imagine a knight fighting. With his partner's hand, he leads the sword against his partner, the enemy. With his mother-child's arm, he holds his shield, with which he protects his mother and child. The nail file. I only file my nails when I also put on makeup. Just joking. But if I were to file my nails, then I would lead the file in my right hand over the left nails, as a right-hander. When filing the right nails, I would take the file in my left hand and hold it. With my right hand, I would guide my right nails over the fixed file. With my left hand, I can't guide the file over my right nails. Ambidexterity doesn't exist. But some people are equally skilled with the left and right hand. These are left-handed people, who have been retrained to use the right. But if this retrained person denies that they have ever been retrained, then in the vast majority of cases, they have a different view. Thus, they have retrained themselves and are supposedly ambidextrous. But they are definitely clapping. Once I stumbled over an obvious right-handed person, who was never retrained but wrote left. This right-hander was left-eyed, so her left-handed writing was just superior to her right-handed writing. This case study was very enlightening for me. We'll get to the eyesight and how to determine it in a moment. Clapping up from the bottom. Unfortunately, it has become ingrained that the hand on top is the partner hand. More precise would be the wording. Notice, the moving hand is the partner hand. Usually, left-handed and right-handed people clap with their respective partner's hand from above on the resting hand below. However, some people clap with their partner's hand from below high and the resting hand lying above. In this case, the mother-child hand is on top. So, you have to look closely at the clap test. Case study clapping test. At a lecture, a married couple approached me. The man had lipomas inside his right leg, which kept recurring, despite surgical removal. I had this man clap his hands, and he clapped from the bottom up. I said his right leg was his partner leg. His wife immediately intervened and contradicted that I explained myself, that the partner doesn't just have to be the life partner. Of course, she wanted to distract. Her reaction was obvious. Obviously, she had such a hunch, and with it a bad conscience. It turned out that she regularly went to a faith association. She was even ceremonially married with a ring to the founder of this religious association. Since the founder was already long dead, one must imagine this ceremony to be like the nuns, who are married to Jesus, likewise through a ring. The man, however, has this marriage of his wife to another man, even if dead, as a slight break in self-value. I can't hug or hold my wife. For this very reason, the inner organ side of his partner leg was also affected. In the active phase, the fatty tissue, connective tissue, necrotizes. At the end of healing, it is and remains thicker than it was before. Suppose one gets into a polycyclic course or hanging healing, so one goes through this SBS repeatedly. In that case, the connective or fatty tissue becomes thicker and thicker. The track for the constant recurrences was his wife's continued cheating, meaning her continued visits to this faith community. The couple was together once at a so-called Hummer therapist, at least he pretended to be. Of course, the therapist let this man clap. But because his left hand was on top, the supposed Hummer therapist thought this patient was left-handed. Therefore, his right leg would be his mother-child leg. But the three of them couldn't find even a rudimentary conflict. How could they? They were looking at the wrong end. Laterality, in toddlers. When you let toddlers clap, they wave both arms around equally. With toddlers, the clapping test is not very successful. Here you have to pay attention to which hand they prefer to grab the spoon with, or with which hand they act more skillfully. Laterality, in animals. With a cow, the clap test also fails. One must observe, with the animal, with which it gives the paw or with which hoof it paws. Of course, all mammals have a partner and a mother-child side. Suppose the right-pawed female dog has a mama ca on her left teat. In that case, she has the same worry conflict about her young as a right-handed human mother has a worry about her child. As a technician, the fact that these 5 biological laws of nature also apply to animals is particularly compelling. Why should Mother Nature write different software for the same organs? Where did we locate whom? The mother and the father. As our parent's child, we located our mother on our mother-child side, the right-handed left and the left-handed right. We have the father on our partner side. So for the daughter or the son, the father is a partner. For us children, this remains forever, even after we have become adults. The daughter and the son, as parents of our children, we have located the children on our mother-child side, as long as they are children. Also, the father has localized his child on the mother-child side. In former times, this was also his job. Let us not discredit the single father, raising his child. From puberty, the children become for us parents visibly more and more the partner. This applies equally to the mother and to the father. The mother sees her adult children as partners. The father likewise. This change from feeling like a child to feeling like a partner does not have to happen abruptly, from one day to the next. It is even possible that one as a parent feels their already adult daughter or son, partly still as a child, and already as a partner. In case of conflict, the SPS then runs on both sides of the body. One then has a so-called central Hummer focus in the brain, which encompasses the mother-child side and the partner side. Case study. Son perceived as child and partner. The father has employed his 30-year-old son in his own company. However, the son occasionally behaves as he did during puberty, when he rebelled against his father. Suppose now a conflict arises between the father and his son. In that case, he can feel his son as a partner of his company, to about 70% and at the same time as a childish little son, to about 30%. The father now gets correspondingly distributed organ symptoms on both sides at the same time. So one can perceive a person both as a partner and as a child. Notice. In nature, there is not only an either, or 0 or 1, like in computer technology, rather often an as well as. The siblings. The biological siblings share the place with our father on our partner side. We perceive brothers and sisters as partners. But again, there are logical, biological, exceptions. If the 10-year-old girl gets a sibling, this 10-year-old girl can develop mother instincts for this baby, which may remain forever. If she has a conflict about her baby, this big sister reacts on her mother-child side. The big sister then feels her sibling, like a mother feels her child, on her mother-child side. So, the partner can become the child. The grandparents, grandma and grandpa, are localized for us grandchildren on our partner side. Exceptions. If the grandma takes care of her grandchild like a mother takes care of her child, this child can have the grandma on his mother-child side. There are many people who actually feel that their grandma is more of a mother, and are less close to their real mother. So, the partner granny became the mother. Only a real grandma can achieve that. It is also possible that the father, partner, becomes frail and senile at an older age. Thereby, he can slip in our perception from the partner side to our mother-child side. You have to take care of your old father as if he were a small child. You have to feed him, wash him, dress him, and make sure he doesn't do anything stupid. As we all know, old people become children again. Parents-in-law. The in-laws are partners, of course. Likewise, we perceive the enemy, wicked mother-in-law, on the battlefield as a partner. Work colleagues, friends, neighbors. All other people, also in the non-family environment, are partners. The neighbors, friends, work colleagues, and the declared enemy are located on our partner side in a conflict. Plants. Plants are also living beings, and on their leaves, we also find this Hummer focus. That the plants also have something like an intention, for example, to come to light, everyone knows. Everyone has already observed how a creeping plant holds on to the found fence wire. A little more difficult is the thought process, that these plants must even know about the bees somehow, because they themselves depend on the bee's existence. Can the plant communicate with another genus, across species? Does the plant have a consciousness? Apparently, it does. There are exciting observations about it. From trees, it is claimed that they can communicate with each other. For me personally, all this is beyond doubt. It lives. That is a crucial thing. Some people really love their plants. But I don't know of any field reports about how a plant lover can react if his favorite withers away. But there will be such cases, for sure. It will depend again on personal feeling, partner, whether one is grateful to the tree inwardly for its fruits, or whether one has it as a tender preciousness in front of him. Pet, the old woman may feel her parakeet is a child she must take care of. In case of conflict, this old woman may react with breast cancer on her mother-child side. She feels the animal as a child. On the other hand, the jockey who wins trophies together with his horse and gets on the front pages, he can feel his horse as a partner. Or even the boy, his dog, by whom he is protected. Notice, the only thing that counts is how the patient feels. What he associated, and what went through his mind at the moment of shock. This association around the pet in the moment of shock can depend on whether one got it as a present. Was the pet given to you by a partner, or was it given to you by a mother-child? I have my experience to report on this with my dog Emma. Case study, my Emma. Emma was the only Rottweiler puppy for sale within a radius of several hundred miles. I needed a dog for protection on my lecture tours. My younger daughter Elizabeth was with me when I bought the puppy. Because she is a bit of a dog expert and would never have let her competent assistance be taken away from her. As a puppy, Emma was already with me on my lecture trips of several weeks in the camper. She was as good a dog as you could ask for. We understood each other at a glance. I understood her, and she understood me. Incredibly, almost telepathically. We also rarely argued and mostly agreed. Unfortunately, she passed away a year ago. It was hard for me, very hard. Now I'd like to explain why in previous conflicts with Emma, and there have been a few, I reacted on this particular side of my body. I'll preface this by saying that I very often had to dispose of Emma's leavings in too embarrassing circumstances. As a guard dog, it failed utterly. Once, she simply accepted a break-in into my mobile home without the slightest objection. Probably I had received too many friendly visitors. For Emma, with an exceptionally skillful burglar, the difference between one of my friends was not recognizable. No matter. I never saw Emma aggressive, not even in extreme situations. Emma always kind of rose above the situation, and she never found it necessary to retort with aggression. She was also really cool. She rode up the mountain with me on a double chairlift, or jumped elegantly down a steep cliff. She also liked to swim in the lake with me. I always had her by my side for 10 years. Ward on my mother-child's foot sole. Emma was still a puppy. I stood on a large gravel parking lot of a small country road with the camper, somewhere in Germany. Carelessly, I let Emma run free on this easily manageable parking lot. I sat in the camper on the laptop, and through the man door, I had an eye on Emma. At some point, I looked through the side window and saw Emma running on the street. I tore my glasses off my nose and ran after Emma. Fortunately, it was only a small country road, and cars only passed occasionally. The next morning, as I was driving away from the parking lot, I noticed a twinge in my left foot sole, when I was pedaling the clutch and thought I had a small stone in my sock. When I checked, instead of the little stone, I saw a small distinctive discolored skin area that was hurting there. It was a stinging wart. So, I must have suffered a separation conflict on my mother-child side. Separation mother, separation child? I could not think of anything. The sole of the foot counts to the organ inside. This is a do not want to be separated conflict. In a sense, stay there, don't go away, or I don't want to go away. There I found my separation conflict immediately. Emma, I didn't want her to run away from me. I didn't want to be separated from her. Aha! Danger recognized, danger averted. Such an incident will certainly not happen to me again. I tied Emma to the leash from now on. You won't believe it. The wart disappeared just as quickly as it had come. And Emma stayed on the leash all these years at such locations. So, I felt Emma was a child. Cramping my mother-child hand. Emma was a puppy then too. Again in a parking lot, this time snowy. I let her run around off-leash in front of me. I hung the leash around my neck and played with the carabiner with my left hand. There was a more giant pile of snow in one corner of this parking lot, the other side of which sloped over a guardrail, directly onto a bustling street. It was evening, and this corner was lit by a street lamp. Suddenly, the small Rottweiler puppy ran up this snow slope. If the puppy slid down the other side, I would have to jump into this canal like in busy street. Somehow, I managed to dissuade Emma from her plan. Starting that evening, and then for several evenings, I kept waking up as I fell asleep, because my left hand was cramping. The spasm is the epileptic crisis of a motor conflict. In my case, concerning the mother-child hand, not being able to hold Emma. Dr. Hummer said that I probably have Emma on my mother-child side because Emma actually came to me through my daughter Elizabeth. So, Dr. Hummer also thought something like that was possible. In my case, however, I think that I still perceived Emma as a child. While in later situations, for example, I pressed Emma to my partner's side during this mountain hike. She was my companion on whom I could rely. Further, conflicts with Emma in her more mature years, I did not observe. Finally, her death loomed over many weeks, and in the process, obviously, nothing caught me on the wrong foot. However, it brought tears from my eyes. Emma was something unique to me. Regardless of handedness. Eyesight. You can quickly determine your eyesight. Find a point in the distance and fixate it with your open eyes. Raise your thumb and, with both eyes open, try to cover this point in the distance with your thumb. It does not matter which hand you use. Both eyes must remain open, while aiming. The thumb will appear transparent. Then close one eye and then the other. Once the thumb is precisely on this point in the distance and once the thumb is completely off, the eye with which the thumb covers this point in the distance precisely is your dominant eye. Your dominant eye is also the eye through which your consciousness perceives the environment. The seat of our consciousness, Dr. Hummer said, is just behind our eyes. If you read these lines now, make yourself conscious which side wall of your nose you perceive first. This eye is your target eye. With this eye, you look into the world. Now, try to perceive the other wall of your nose. That's not so easy, is it? I have heard that the police are trained to fire the handgun in both hands stretched out from themselves with both eyes open. This is how they try to reduce the error rate due to the different eyesight of the students. In archery, the eyesight stands out very clearly. The eyesight can be different from the handedness. So, you can be right-handed as a left-eyed person and vice versa. Notice, for the partner and mother-child side, the clapping test remains valid. Drive the nail, the right-eyed person takes the hammer in his right hand, the left-eyed person vice versa. The dominant eye guides the hammer precisely into the target. As a counter-test, try to drive the nail with your other hand. Most of the time, it goes wrong. Independently retrain the handedness. If the left-handed person is right-eyed, and he is from birth, he is more precise in using his hands if he obeys his right eye. Automatically he then trains his right hand. For example, to get more beautiful handwriting. When hammering in a nail, he will also use his right hand. Footing, there are people who, contrary to their handedness, use the other leg when playing soccer. According to Dr. Hummer, there should be footing. So, as a right-handed person, one can kick the ball, preferably with the left leg. This peculiarity can be observed. The question arises to me, whether these soccer players are not left-eyed? Further, there is an ear-ness and a nose-ness. So with which ear one hears dominantly, and with which nose one smells dominant. There is eye-ness, foot-ness, ear-ness, and the biological reason for this is unknown, and all of these properties can also be mixed up. Notice, to determine the partner and mother-child side, the clapping test is the only valid procedure. In other words, if the clapping test should not be unambiguous, it is not permissible to conclude about. For example, the footing on the partner and mother-child side. The influence on the organ level. Let us now pursue how to infer from the symptom at the organ level, for example, hip pain on the left, to the content of the conflict. So, how does one proceed? Correct. One determines the handedness with the clapping test. Thus, you know whether your left hip pain has something to do with one of your partners, your mother, or one of your children. In the course of the chapter about the basics of germanische Heilkunde, we still learn the germ layers related organs, germ layers related brain relays, germ layers related conflicts, and their common dependence on the biological handedness. If one is lucky enough to have Dr. Hummer's scientific diagnosis chart, then look up the connective tissue group, because the bone and cartilage belong to this connective tissue. Both have even approximately the same cause, namely a self-devaluation, not being able to assert oneself against someone. If this SDC is perceived as severe, then the bone at the hip reacts. If it is perceived as less severe, then the cartilage reacts. So, hip pain on the left means in the right-handed person, he has finally been able to assert himself over mother or child. Let us proceed systematically according to the germ layers in our initial question. Brainstem controlled, SBS. The brainstem controls the glandular tissue, and the glandular-like tissue is always about the morsel. The right organ side tries to pick up the good morsel, and the left organ side tries to get rid of the bad morsel of feces. The handedness has no meaning here. Our ancestors, who still lived in the primeval sea millions of years ago, might have had this closed ring form with a primeval mouth. Its right organ side took up the good morsel, and its left organ side excreted the bad excrement morsel again. All this happened through the one single opening, the primordial mouth. By the way, sea anemones still look like this today. This worm had only two things in mind. Namely, to eat and to reproduce. Accordingly, it is about morsel conflicts here. A social behavior might have been still unknown to our ancestors. For him, there was only the big eye. He did not distinguish yet between partner and mother-child. That there must have been this ring form, Dr. Hummer deduces that the brain relays in the brain stem are in precisely the same arrangement as the organs on the organ level. Starting on the right with the right mouth area, passing over the stomach and intestine, and ending in the left mouth area. Example of colon cancer. For example, colon cancer is located in this yellow group. Now, if you have this cauliflower-like colon cancer located on the right, it means the following. It is indigestible anger, that is, a bad morsel of feces, that you can't get rid of. The Hummer focus for this is in the brainstem on the left. The colon in the abdomen extends up from the lower right, lying across the abdomen above and leading down to the anus on the left. However, the entire colon has as its conflict content a bad morsel of feces, it cannot get rid of. So whether the colon is at its beginning on the right side of the abdomen, or its end is on the left side, it doesn't matter. The corresponding brain relay is on the left side of the brainstem. In the graphic of this ring-shaped worm, the complete colon is therefore on the left. The section is seen from the conflict content. The transition from morsel intake to morsel output is approximately at the small intestine, thus in front of the large intestine, on the organ level, and in the arrangement of the brain relays in the brainstem. We also know from the organ symptom where to look for the Hummer focus in the brain CT. However, one does not know from the organ symptom of colon cancer alone, with whom this indigestible trouble has to do. This indigestible trouble can have happened with every any person. Let's define a random person, for example, the mother. Now, it doesn't matter whether the person concerned is left-handed or right-handed, in the brainstem, even the hormone status is of no importance. So, it is also wholly unimportant whether this left or right-handed person is male or female. Both, thus the left-handed and the right-handed person, have, in case of an indigestible anger conflict with their mother, the Hummer focus in the left brainstem. And both react at the same place as the large intestine with a carcinoma. Or, example pulmonary nodule focal point. Therefore, the fear of death conflict goes to the pulmonary alveoli, because this is about the air morsel. Why actually? In nature, one can survive without food for weeks. Without water, one makes it for a few days, but without air, one will die immediately. The purpose of this special pulmonary nodule cancer program lies in the active phase, being able to absorb or release more air through cell division in the lung alveoli. For the two lung halves right and left in the thorax, there is in each case right and left in the brainstem a corresponding brain relay. In the past, the right lung alveoli must have taken in oxygen. The left must have given off carbon dioxide, Dr. Hummer explains. Today, both lungs can take in and give out both. Notice: there is no crossing of nerves to the organ level in the brainstem. The right brain relays in the brainstem control the right organ side, and the left brain relays the left organ side. Mind you, we speak here of our ring-shaped ancestor from prehistoric times. From this ancestor, we have inherited all its sensible biological special programs. In the course of the history of development, we have received many more. Suppose now, the father receives the news about the death of his asthmatic son. In that case, he can react conflictively with a fear of death and a single pulmonary nodule. If this son was bronchial asthmatic, prolonged exhalation, unable to get rid of lumps of air, then this father has the Hummer focus on the left side of the brainstem. He reacts with this single pulmonary nodule in the left lung. However, suppose this son was laryngeal asthmatic, prolonged inhalation, unable to inhale a morsel of air. In that case, this father has the Hummer focus on the right side of the brainstem, and his single pulmonary nodule would be in his right lung. In fear of death for himself, he would have the lung full of pulmonary nodules and the Hummer focus on both sides of the brainstem. Cerebellum-controlled SBS. From the cerebellum, biological handedness has a critical significance, right through to the cerebral cortex, on which side of the brain the Hummer focus strikes. And thus also on which side of the body the symptom occurs. Notice: starting from the cerebellum, there is a crossing from the brain to the organ level. In other words, the right side of the brain controls the organ's left side, and vice versa. This cross-linkage between brain and organ is generally known. It is also valid for the cerebral medulla and the cerebral cortex. In the brainstem, this crossing does not exist. Thus, the right cerebellum controls the glandular-like tissue of the left side of the body. The left cerebellum controls the glandular-like tissue of the right side of the body. The question is, how does the Hummer focus get into this brain relay? Of course, this is decided by the conflict content itself, and from now on, depending on the biological handedness. Example of breast cancer. Suppose the mother has a worried conflict about her child, and she is right-handed. In that case, the Hummer focus hits her cerebellum on the right, in the left mammary gland's relay. This right-handed mother reacts with a mammary gland CA on her left mother-child breast. The reverse is valid for the left-handed mother. There is also breast cancer in men, but only in the more feminine men, says Dr. Hummer. Even in men, their handedness determines whether they respond with breast cancer on the right or left. If the breast cancer mother were to have her affected breast wholly amputated, the associated Hummer focus in the cerebellum would still remain unaffected. Completely untouched by this mutilation, her concern for her child would remain. The breast cancer would also not be able to jump to her breast on the opposite side. If a woman has a tumor in her left breast, and the clapping test shows her to be right-handed, then we know she must have a worried dispute conflict either with her mother, or with one of her children. If her mother died 10 years ago, but she has only had this lump for a few months, then her dead mother is not even a possibility. It must be a conflict that has to do with one of her children, and just a few months ago but continues to this day. Example: acne on the back. The cause of the acne is a violation of the integrity as conflict content, and it concerns the dermis with its sweat glands. The dermis symptoms would be apart from the acne, the pimple, the shingles, the melanoma, the skin fungus. The associated Hummer focus is located in the very back of the cerebellum. Suppose one notices conflictively that one is poorly spoken about. In that case, one feels this as an injury to his integrity. It starts the SBS of the dermis with cell multiplication, which is also the biological sense. The wall to the outside, that is, the dermis itself, becomes thicker as a result. You can protect yourself better, biologically speaking. Melanoma is therefore a conflict-active symptom. In the healing phase, this cell proliferation of the dermis, which is no longer required, is broken down by the fungal bacteria in a tuberculous manner, and the symptom of skin tuberculosis is present. The pimple, the acne, the shingles, skin fungus, are symptoms of the healing phase. Now if someone, male or female, complains of acne on his right shoulder, and the clapping test reveals a right-handed person, then we know the following. One or more partners must have poorly spoken about him, which he felt to be conflictive. Of course, temporally, this conflict is to be looked for shortly before the first symptom. And of course, there must have been a so-called track until today. In any case, this acne on his right shoulder has nothing to do with his mother, nor does it have anything to do with his children. Thus, we can already considerably narrow down the group of people in question. Through thoughtful questioning, we learn from the patient that the entire village has poorly spoken about him. And this cause is important to know, to derive an individual therapy from this highly individual conflict. There are always tracks to acne, and one must not disregard these tracks in the intended therapy. Cerebral medulla controlled SBS. We are at the connective tissue with the cerebral medulla, which is bone, tendon, cartilage, adipose tissue, and so on. The cerebral medulla is about self-value collapse, with the most severe one affecting the bone and the slightest one affecting the adipose tissue. Example: shoulder pain on the left. For the shoulder, the conflict content is a self-value collapse towards mother-child or partner. One was a spoiled child towards the mother, or one was a bad parent, no matter if father or mother, towards the child, or one was a lousy partner towards the partner. If there is chronic shoulder pain, there must be a track. If a left-handed person has shoulder pain on the left side, this conflict must have to do with a partner. If a right-handed person has shoulder pain on the left, it must have to do with either the mother or one's children. Example of testicular pain on the right. After a resolved loss conflict over a loved one or animal, with painless testicular necrosis in the active phase, these necroses are refilled with swelling in the healing phase. This can hurt. In this healing phase, the patients are then running to conventional medicine and getting their testicular cancer diagnosis and subsequent conflicts, mutilation, and poisoning for payment via their health insurance. Awful. At the end of the healing phase, the swelling reduces, but the testicle remains noticeably thicker. Also, this man's libido is noticeably higher, due to a permanently increased testosterone production of his indurated testicular cyst. And this is also the permanent biological sense of this luxury group. Namely, with the help of increased libido, to quickly provide for offspring again, to compensate for this loss. If now the right-handed man has testicle pain on the right side, he has solved a loss conflict for a partner. If he knows the Germanische Heilkunde of Dr. Hummer, he would be happy about this overcome conflict and about the prospect of an increased libido. He will not need Viagra in later life. He will also be able to estimate when the swelling and thus, the pain will decrease. He would gratefully decline a testicular amputation. Cerebral cortex-driven SBS. The cerebral cortex controls the squamous epithelium and functional failures. The handedness is crucial. Squamous epithelium. You have to look at the territory areas separately here. Although also in the territory areas, the handedness decides whether the Hummer focus strikes right or left. This has nothing to do with partner or mother-child side on the organ level. In these territorial areas, Mother Nature has again arranged her special programs somewhat differently. Outside these somewhat complex territorial areas, the interaction between brain and organ level is described so far. Example: neurodermatitis. Neurodermatitis is a hanging healing of a separation conflict concerning the outer skin. So, there must be a track, which again and again provides for recurrences. Neurodermatitis sufferers usually know where the first symptom appeared, and also approximately when that was. And here is the key. Was it left or right? Is one left or right-handed? With the outer skin, you also have to know that the organ outside means wanting to be separated. And that the organ inside means not wanting to be separated. If you then know as a right-handed person, the neurodermatitis started on the hip's left side, it must have been a separation conflict from the mother, and until today you react allergically to it. Danger recognized, danger averted. If you know why, then you often already know what to do. Example, corn on the left foot. If the squamous epithelium gets into hanging healing at points, it builds up more and more squamous epithelium. If there is a separation conflict concerning the outer skin, this can lead to a wart symptom. The corn is nothing different. If the 70-year-old right-handed person has had a corn on his left mother-child's foot since he was 5 years old, this separation conflict was about his mother. A separation conflict from the own child is not possible with 5 years. Example, conjunctivitis right, a slight visual separation conflict, lose sight or the opposite, get out of my sight, affects the conjunctiva. The more severe one affects the cornea and the most severe affects the lens. Now, if the child has conjunctivitis on the left and is right-handed, then this child could solve a visual separation from its mother. Inflammation is always a healing phase, no matter what SBS. Functional failures. Functional failures include all those SBS that make neither cell proliferation nor cell loss in the conflict active phase. Instead, they just make functional failure, such as paralysis, diabetes, loss of sense of smell, etc. There can be no inflammation with functional failures, because nothing has to be cleared or built up. Example, stroke. Someone from the village informs you that your wife is having an affair with the mayor. And that everyone in the village knows this, except you. Bang! The blow hits you. You have been made a fool, and as a result you suffer facial paralysis. By whom was one made a fool? The wife, the mayor, and the whole village. These people are all partners towards us. One suffers face paralysis on their partner's side. As a right-hander on the right, and as a left-hander on the left. The Hummer focus is crossed out in the motor cortex center of the cerebrum. Example, paralysis of the right leg. Not holding or fending off the partner in a motor conflict results in paralysis on the partner's leg. Suppose one felt suddenly like an impaled person, and the conflict of not being able to hold the partner, and/or not being able to fend off the mayor. In that case, one has paralysis of the partner leg, and/or the partner arm. Example, Raynaud's disease left. The periosteum has a brutal separation as conflict content. In the active phase, the periosteum causes neither cell proliferation nor cell loss, but the nerve network is actually affected. It belongs to the so-called gullet mucous membrane pattern. It hurts in the conflict active phase, which is also diagnosed as rheumatism. It can hurt like hell, similar to frostbitten fingers that slowly thaw out. However, this active phase can also lead to Raynaud's syndrome, which is also misinterpreted as a circulatory disorder. If the person with Raynaud's syndrome on the left hand is right-handed, he has suffered a brutal separation between mother or child. If the symptoms are on the inside of the hand, then he was brutally separated. If the symptoms are on the outside of the hand, then he wanted to be brutally separated. We are starting to interpret the organ level, aren't we? Territory areas. However, it is somewhat more complicated in the territorial area. In addition to the handedness, the hormonal situation also plays a role, and the hormonal situation can change. We will deal with the subject of hormonal status in more detail in the section on psychoses. Let us now construct an example with one left-handed and one right-handed man, and one left-handed and one right-handed woman. We let all four people suffer their very first territorial conflict. The women suffer their first territorial area conflict as the hormonally constrained female, and the men as the hormonally constrained male. We let the males each suffer a loss of territory conflict. The females each suffer a sexual frustration conflict of not being mated. What the territory represents for the man, the baby is for the woman. This territory area map is valid for the right-handers. With the left-handers comes the so-called night hop. The feminine woman. The right-handed woman has her Hummer focus in the left female territorial area, more precisely in the relay for the coronary veins and uterine cervix neck. If she resolves this conflict, pulmonary embolism occurs in the crisis of the healing phase. The left-handed woman, who feels this conflict completely identical with the right-handed woman, has the so-called night's hop. The Hummer focus strikes her exactly on the opposite side in the male area, more precisely in the relay for the coronary arteries. If the left-handed woman solves this conflict, the heart attack occurs in the crisis of the healing phase. It is similar with the men, only in reverse. The male man. Let us discuss the men whom we want to be masculine quite deliberately. The right-handed man has his Hummer focus on the right territorial area, more precisely in the coronary artery relay. If he solves this conflict, the heart attack follows in the crisis of the healing phase. The left-handed person feels this conflict exactly the same as the right-handed person. However, he has the so-called Knight's hop, and the Hummer focus strikes him exactly on the opposite side in the female area. More precisely in the relay for the coronary veins. If the left-handed person solves his conflict, the pulmonary embolism follows in the healing phase crisis. Therefore, these special programs of the territorial areas definitely have something to do with the handedness, but absolutely nothing to do with the partner or mother-child side. The coronary vessels have no partner or mother-child side. All SBS controlled from the territorial area have nothing to do with the partner or mother-child side. But the territorial areas have to do with the hormone situation, which can change. You could now replace these 4 young people with old ones. The grandma is now the man, and the grandpa is now the woman. What had remained the same with grandma and grandpa is their handedness. The handedness never changes. Concerning the fact that most people have these heart relays active, cardiac death or a fatal pulmonary embolism is the exception. One does not usually resolve these territorial conflicts for a lifetime. If such a resolution does occur, those men who die of a heart attack are usually right-handed. Those men who die of pulmonary embolism are mostly left-handed. Women are protected by the female estrogen, and rarely die of a heart attack. On the other hand, grandmothers lack estrogen and may very well die of a heart attack. I know that all this sounds a bit complicated. Everything is discussed in more detail in the chapter on psychoses. We have now discussed the meaning of biological handedness for the many different special programs. We can even derive this meaning from the particular program itself. Depending on the tissue, these rules discussed so far apply. Notice. The meaning of the biological handedness depends on the germ layer. Dieter over the psyche. If, despite everything, the biological handedness is still unclear, then starting from the organ symptom, one can search for a relevant conflict. From the symptom, we know which conflict to look for. We also know from the symptom whether it is a conflict-active symptom, or a healing phase symptom. We also know when the symptoms occurred. After all, the conflict itself must always have the 3 criteria. Highly acute dramatic, isolative perceived and caught on the wrong foot, meaning absolutely surprising. The next question would then be, was such an incident with the mother, child, or partner? If one can then pinpoint the mother, we know from the sightedness of the biological handedness symptom. One must go even this way with the animal, because with the animal the clap test fails. Case study. Bone dent on the skull. In a seminar participant who had a more considerable dent on her left skull bone, the handedness could not be determined by anything. But the organ side of the symptom could reveal her biological handedness. The cranial dome has as conflict content a severe intellectual self-value collapse. How could I have been so stupid? And such a conflict she has suffered as a leading employee of a big company, actually towards her boss. The boss is definitely a partner. So, the seminar participant had to be left-handed. Case study. Udder inflammation unilateral. An acquaintance of mine had a small farm with a single cow. This cow let herself be milked only by him, and by nobody else. One day, however, the farmer had to leave the farm for a week. When he came back home and milked his cow, she subsequently got a one-sided udder inflammation. So out of her 4 teats, 2 on the same organ side were affected. After a week, the spook was over. The udder inflammation is the healing phase of the excretory ducts, after a resolved separation conflict associated with the udder. In a human woman, it would be called mastitis. This cow must have obviously felt a separation conflict at her teats, from her beloved farmer. I said to my acquaintance that he now knew what laterality his cow had. One would have to find out whether such a cow feels the farmer as a calf or as a partner. My guess is a partner. A therapist is all the more successful, the better he can put himself in the patient's place. One would need an animal whisperer for the animal. Case study. Pain at tendon plate. As a non-therapist and layman, I am always fascinated by Dr. Hummer when I come across case studies like the following. A left-handed seminar participant, about 50 years old, complained of chronic pain for half a year on her foot sole, more precisely on the tendon plate of her right foot. The tendons are connective tissue and have as their cause a self-value collapse of not being able to do something. This tendon is actually there for ability. What do we need the tendons on the foot for? To walk, claw the toes, to balance, etc. She was left-handed, so this self-value collapse must have to do with either her mother or one of her children. However, her mother had died 20 years ago, and she had no children at all. Now it gets exciting, doesn't it? But such a conflict must have happened to her. Otherwise, one would have to doubt Germanische Heilkunde. I asked her if she perceived someone else as her biological mother, for example, her grandmother. She definitely denied it. I further asked if she perceived someone else as her child. And suddenly the tears flowed with her, as if one had turned on a water tap. It was about her twin sister. When the tears flow, it is an unmistakable sign that this issue is the conflict you are looking for. 20 years ago, when her mother died, her twin sister went into psychosis and ever since, lives in a psychiatric institution. 2 to 3 times a week since then, she regularly visited her sister in the hospital. So, she took care of her sick sister like a mother takes care of her sick child. Half a year ago, her sister was transferred to an institution 300 kilometers away. From now on, she could not visit her child regularly, but only from time to time. In the active phase, the tendon necrotizes, causing no pain. In the healing phase, the tendon is replenished with inflammation and swelling, which also causes pain. At the end of the healing phase, the swelling disappears. However, the tendon remains thicker than before, which is the biological sense, see luxury group. Since her sister's transfer half a year ago, this seminar participant has a hanging healing with her tendon plate, which causes chronic pain. After I found the conflict on the mother-child side with this seminar participant, even though her mother had been dead for a long time, and she had no children, I sank into my thoughts. How could Dr. Hummer have discovered all this? Another seminar participant was a masseur, who must have overheard our conversation. In any case, he really forced his massage therapy on the sufferer, and she let him do it. He hurriedly massaged her foot and gave one or the other nutritional tip, which in his opinion could still be helpful. When will mankind understand the discovery of Dr. Hummer? Will we ever be able to grasp it? Example, introductal mammacie. This 30-year-old woman died of breast cancer during conventional medical pseudotherapy. Through the illness of his wife, her husband found the way to Germanische Heilkunde. And he researched the cause of his wife's breast cancer, because this breast cancer was, according to Dr. Hummer, on her mother-child's breast. With the best determination in the world, the husband could not, in retrospect, find any dispute between his wife and her mother, and she had no children. He finally found her diaries, and understood why she had her breast cancer on that side. At 7 years old, his wife played as a child not with dolls like her friends of the same age, but with her little twin sisters who had just been born. As mentioned earlier, a 7-year-old around her much younger siblings can develop maternal feelings. At the age of 16, however, these twin sisters went off the straight and narrow and into the drug milieu. Eventually, she even moved away to faraway Paris, where they became involved in prostitution. The patient suffered a separation conflict on her mother-child side about her sister, who she actually felt like her children. The widower found the following sentence in his wife's diary: "I don't want to have to play mother anymore." This was apparently her conflict resolution. She was able to change her inner attitude towards this problem, and thus solve it. In the subsequent healing phase, the so-called introductal mammacie developed. The cause of introductal mammacie is a separation conflict, associated with the breast. The child was torn from my breast, or the partner tore himself from my breast. In the conflict active phase, the milk duct squamous epithelium ulcerates, which is also the biological sense. Namely, the ulcerative dilation of the milk ducts, so now the remaining milk can flow out. This active phase is seldom noticed, because it is without pain. The affected breast is cold and numb. Possibly due to the ulcerative contraction of the milk ducts, there may be a noticeable dent on the surface of the breast. If it happens directly near the nipple, The so-called slippery nipple can be formed in this way. However, the conflict active phase does not hurt. But the pain of the healing phase is there immediately after the conflict resolution, which is naturally unpleasant. If the load of the conflict is smaller, you will have mastitis in the healing phase. With a larger conflict load, you have the intraductal mamma Ca. All these squamous cell carcinomas, such as intraductal mamma Ca, bronchial Ca, cervical Ca, bladder Ca, etc., are not real cell division cancers at all, but only healing swellings. They are all healing phase symptoms. At the end of the healing phase, the swelling disappears, and all is well. By the way, out of 100 breast cancers, 80% are intraductal healing phases. Thank you very much for your attention. Helmut Pilhar, father of Olivia.